Hey there, all you chipmunks, ready to sing your song? So, sixth graders, welcome aboard. We are going to go ahead and get into our last unit of the Rome Republic to Empire series. This is going to be our last lesson in that unit. We have a test coming very soon. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Make sure you stay to the end. Got some announcements for you, some housekeeping things to look out for. But for now, we're going to be going through our last section, so make sure you have something to write with, something to write on, again, something to write with, something to write on. You're going to want to take the notes as you follow along. This is going to be section I, the Roman peace. I'll say it again, section I, the Roman peace. We've made it all the way to section I, a number of sections. This is going to be section I, the Roman peace. And this is going to be the last section of Rome, Republic to Empire. Our guiding question for today's study is going to be, how did the Roman Empire become rich and prosperous? We're going to be talking about Rome as an empire. We've been talking about Rome as a republic. Now we're going to be looking at the empire angle of things, and we're going to be talking about how did they become so rich? Where did they get their wealth from? How did that happen? And how did they become so prosperous? How were things peaceful? How did they grow? How did they expand? To prosper is to do well. So how did they become wealthy? How did they begin to do well? How did the Roman Empire become rich? How did they become prosperous? That's our goal and our focus to answer that and dive into that question today with this section. Well, the first thing I want you to write down is that after Nero's death, violent rebellion erupted in the Roman Empire. I'll read that again, and it's up there for you to write down. After Nero's death, violent rebellion erupted in the empire. While you're writing that down, you may remember yesterday we talked about one of the rulers named Augustus. So Augustus was one of Caesar's relatives. He ruled, but eventually he passed away. And after him, there was a couple different rulers. There were some other emperors after him. One of them was Nero. Nero was kind of a crazy guy. He was pretty wild. He killed a number of people. It's said that he committed suicide as well. And after he dies, violent rebellion erupts in Rome. Things break bad in Rome. Things start to break apart. People start to get upset. He dies, and violent rebellion, people start to get shaken up, things start to get topsy-turvy all in the Roman Empire. So things are falling into chaos, similar to when Rome was a republic. Things are starting to get chaotic. Things are looking grim. Again, we saw a lot of times in the Roman Empire where things were wild. They were getting a little bit chaos-filled, and that's happening again now after Nero's death. Nero dies, and there's some chaos, some rumblings in Rome. So I want you to write down in your notes now that Vespasian became emperor in AD 69 and crushed opposition to Roman rule. I'll read it again, and it's there for you to write down. Vespasian became emperor in AD 69 and crushed opposition to Roman rule. So Nero's dead. He's out. There starts to be rebellion and uprising in Rome. Then this new guy becomes emperor. His name is Vespasian. And again, you can write Vespasian became emperor in AD 69 and crushed opposition to Roman rule. So this new guy, Vespasian, comes into power. He becomes the emperor in Rome in AD 69, and he crushes the opposition. He takes out the enemies, runs the emperors out of town. Runs the enemies of Rome out of town, pushes them down, stops the rebellions, gets rid of the opposition and the enemies of Rome. He settles the people down, puts his fist down, slams down, and takes a crack at it to make sure that things are settled down and at peace again. One of these rebellions he actually shut down. We talked about a little bit earlier in the year when we talked about Jewish history. And there's different parts of it that relate to the Bible and the overall big picture and Jewish history in general. There was actually a rebellion in Israel. The Romans owned Israel at the time. They didn't own Israel. God owns Israel. God owns all the earth. But Israel at the time was under Roman rule. The Romans had taken over the Jewish people. They ruled Israel at the time. They ruled Israel in the time of the New Testament when Paul is writing, when Jesus is alive and walking the earth. So they're ruling over Israel. And Israel is one of the places that rebels. They have rebels there. They start to fight, and they actually get crushed by the Romans. They get crushed. They get beat down in a lot of ways. A lot of people die. There's a lot of suffering and bloodshed. One of the things that Rome does in Israel specifically is they actually take and they destroy the Jewish temple. Remember, we talked about the temple in Israel earlier in the year. We've talked about it in Bible. It's a big area where they worshiped in Jerusalem, where they went before God. It's a big holy Jewish religion site. They would go to the temple, and the temple was destroyed by the Romans. That was the last Jewish temple. There hasn't been one since. The Jewish people, it was destroyed not by them, it was destroyed by the Romans because they were rebelling. The Jewish people were rebelling. The Romans came in, gave them a lot of battle, a lot of struggle, a lot of suffering and death, and they also destroyed the temple. They wiped it out. They got rid of it, and there hasn't been a temple since then. This time period, though, in Rome wasn't all death and destruction. There was a lot of rebellions, a lot of squashing those rebellions, a lot of tearing down buildings and suffering and pain. But there was also some other things happening, like at this time, the famous Colosseum was being built. The Colosseum was used for things like gladiator shows, fights between animals or humans and animals, or even fights between humans. So when you think of Rome and you think of this big outdoor theater, the Colosseum, this was being built during this time as well. So it wasn't just all war. Some things in Rome were going well for them, not so well for other people that weren't big fans of Rome, trying to rebel from Rome and get out of Rome's grip. Things were just going poorly for them. And you would think maybe things would get better under Vespasian. I mean, he's crushing the enemies. He's building things like the Colosseum. But the fact of the matter is there's more chaos. Chaos continues to go on in the empire. Even with new rulers, Vespasian eventually passes away, and there's a few rulers after him. But the chaos continues. It's kind of like an infomercial. There's more. Things get a little worse. And some of these disasters and things that Rome goes through are actually absolutely crazy. One of the things that happens that you may have heard of before is called Vesuvius. What is Vesuvius? Well, Vesuvius is a mountain. Vesuvius is a volcano, and a volcano, it's near this town that was really populated, a popular town in the Roman Empire called Pompeii. Well, Vesuvius was a volcano, and it exploded. It blew up. Lava, ash, hot steam came upon the town, killed many people. It's a famous archaeology site now. They've found remains of people. They found parts of people preserved in ash and different materials, obviously not alive still, but the mountain blew. It killed many people. This was a big tragedy in Rome because Pompeii, the town, was very populated. A lot of people died and suffered, and there was a lot of ash and a lot of natural disaster because Mount Vesuvius blew. A lot of you who are into the I Survived books, you may have read the ones for 9/11 or situations like that. There's one actually about the destruction of Pompeii. So if you're ever interested in learning more about Pompeii, reading some more information about it, this is a great series that highlights it, written towards the middle school, young high school age groups. It talks more about Pompeii, what it would have been like to live through that natural disaster and this crazy tragedy in the ancient world. Another bad thing that was happening in Rome, there was a great fire that spread through Rome. Some people say that it might have been the one emperor who started it on purpose to blame some people. People aren't really sure how this fire started, but this large fire started in Rome. It just kind of started. It burned up a lot of places. It wasn't due to the volcano. It was another type of fire, but it was like a city fire. There was this massive fire that caused an issue, burned up a lot of places. Some people died, obviously, in it as well. But all these disasters from fire, volcano blowing, it's chaos, and things are really shaken up, and Rome is going a little crazy and quite wild in the process. Now, I want to talk about what's going on with Rome in the greater scheme. So they've got this fire, they've got all this crazy stuff going on, and you may be thinking to yourself, wait a moment, Mr. McLeaf. Fires, Vesuvius, a blown up volcano, battles, rebellion, persecution of the Jewish people, the Christian people. Man, this is all wow. Mr. McLeaf, you told us this section was called the Roman peace. This isn't peaceful at all. As a matter of fact, it's just downright scary at times. You're probably sitting there thinking, why is this called the Roman peace? Because it has yet to be peaceful. Well, hang on there, young bucks, because this is where we're going to turn the corner and start to talk about the Roman peace. This is all leading up to what's going to be called the Roman peace, a time of much more tranquility, slowing it down, shifting it down a couple gears. I want you to write down, after all this wild stuff happens, all these wild leaders, things go wrong with natural disasters, rebellions, all kind of stuff. But now I want you to write in your notes, a series of 5 quote-unquote good emperors helped Rome grow and prosper through public works programs and social and economic reforms. I know it's kind of longer. I'll read it for you again, and it's up there for you. I want you to write it down. A series of 5 good emperors helped Rome grow and prosper through public works programs and social and economic reforms. So after all this craziness, things start to settle down because there's 5 new leaders that come to power, 5 good emperors, if you will, that we're going to talk about, and they help Rome. They help Rome grow and prosper. They bring in new government programs. They bring in social or people group reforms, monetary reforms, doing with economics. These 5 good emperors are going to come in, change the tide, change things up, that things are going to turn the corner, they're going to get better and head to what we're going to call the Roman peace, the period that you should expect and know that we'll be talking about today, because I told you the section was called the Roman peace. So I want you to write down your notes, 5 good emperors of the Roman peace era. Again, you can give yourself the heading, 5 good emperors of the Roman peace era, because I'm going to have you write down these 5 good emperors. Why do we have good in quotation marks? Well, obviously they might have done some bad. They may have persecuted the church or Jewish or Christian people, so they're not necessarily completely good people. I don't want you to make that mistake, but they're not necessarily bad either. We're calling them good emperors in quotation marks because they were good for Rome. They did good things for Rome. They grew Rome historically. So we're going to talk about and focus on the good that they did, at least talking about this lesson today. We won't necessarily break into all the bad, dive into all those dynamics and details. We're just talking about the good, the main reasons they're remembered, which are these good things. So you can write down 5 good emperors of the Roman peace era. I'm going to have you write down each one's name and what they did. I've just given you a short little blurb summarizing what they did, so make sure you write down the name and what they did as we go through and talk about them. The first one I want you to write down is going to be Nerva. He's the first emperor that we're talking about in these good emperors, and that's Nerva. Nerva, you can write down that Nerva changed taxes and helped the poor. We're going to call him the tax man. He was the tax man. He changed taxes and helped the poor. That was Nerva. He switches things up, similar to Augustus, changing taxes, trying to get more money for those in poverty, trying to help out the common people in Rome who were overall pretty poor. That's Nerva, changing taxes, helping the poor. Next one is going to be Trajan. Trajan. What did Trajan do? Well, he expanded the empire, so he got Rome more land. He grew Rome even more than it already had been grown, and he gave money for education. So Trajan expanded the empire and gave money for education. Money for education, kind of like a scholarship, like when you go to college one day and you can get free money for school based off your academics or maybe playing a sport. But it wasn't necessarily like that. Trajan just knew a lot of people were maybe impoverished, so he was giving out money that more people could get an education, a free education, or at least an affordable education in the empire. Next one I want you to write down is Hadrian. Hadrian made Roman law easier to understand for everybody. I'll say that again. Hadrian made Roman law easier to understand for everybody. So for those that maybe couldn't read or were having trouble reading, like they weren't on an advanced reading level, they were the common man or the common woman, the common people in Rome, he made the law easier to understand for everybody. That was Hadrian. Why would this be important? Well, if the laws are easy to understand, they're easy to follow. You can follow along with them. You can be an active citizen. You can be a citizen in good standing. So that's super important that he did that and accomplished that. That's a major thing to affect your citizens. Next emperor we're going to talk about, Antonius Pius. Antonius Pius. He made laws to help orphans. That was Antonius Pius. He made laws to help orphans. With a lot of death and tragedy, whether it's from rebellion or from natural disasters, obviously some families were going to die and leave children behind. So Antonius Pius comes and he makes laws to help orphans. He tries to think of ways to help orphans, boys and girls that are left behind from their families, left behind from their parents, and don't have any caretakers, don't have any guardians. Antonius Pius is making laws to help the orphans. Last good emperor we're going to talk about of the Roman peace era, Marcus Aurelius, that's a weird last name, but Marcus Aurelius, he united Rome's economy. Marcus Aurelius, he united Rome's economy. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying he pulled together their financial situation. They were in some poverty in some certain areas to deal with finances and the economy. He helped fix that up, united Rome, got Rome on some united currency systems and things like that, getting them united, coming together in the money, the financial situation, uniting that, bringing that together. So we got the 5 quote-unquote good emperors of the Roman peace era. Make sure you wrote each of them down, what they did, giving you a basic knowledge of some of the crucial things that they did, just knowing these are the highlights, the things that they're most remembered for, that they contributed and did overall for the Roman Empire, for their people. But with all that, there's even more to these emperors and more to this Roman peace time period. So there's a lot going on in this Roman peace time period, as you can see with these emperors. A lot of changes, a lot of new things. And a lot of these changes are coming in the big cities. Rome is really growing and expanding, not just with more land, but with more people. Things are getting very populated. The cities are being updated too. Architecture in the city, art in the city, different inventions, different ideas. And one of the specific things we're going to talk about is going to be let me get my drawing tool, going to be this thing you see. It's going to be this thing you see. Let me get my drawing tool. Going to be this thing you see right here, running along here. Any guesses what that is? It's called an aqueduct. Aqueduct. I want you to write down your notes the term aqueduct. It's a human-made channel carrying water over long distances. So I want you to write down this term in your notes. Aqueduct. Not the same way you would normally spell aqua. That's okay. It's just how it's spelled for this word. Aqueduct. It's a human-made channel carrying water over long distances. So Rome built a lot of these aqueducts. They wanted to get water to their cities, their places that were maybe far away from water sources. That was part of their goal. Obviously, you need water to survive. You need it for various and different things. So they made these aqueducts. They made these channels, these passageways, and built up tunnels that have these arches to channel water and carry water over long distances to where the water would be needed. This is what one of the aqueducts looks like. It's still standing. I've actually been there. It's in Israel. Like I said, Rome used to rule over Israel, so they built some aqueducts and some different things there, different buildings and pieces of architecture. But you can go visit some of the Roman aqueducts still over around the Mediterranean region, like I said, especially around Israel. This is one, as you can see, it's kind of a beachy area now. People hang out by it. They put up their lawn chairs, but it's pretty big. Those archways are taller than me, taller than most of you. You can stand under them, but the top, the water would run through the top. It was a channel. They would connect it to a sea or whatever they needed, and they would channel the water through that top of the tunnel, have those archways on it as well. Very intricate work, very well built, especially for early times. They were very intelligent. They had a lot of engineering skill, a lot of engineering technique. So we're starting to see Rome grow. We've been talking about Rome as this growing hulk of an empire, this incredible hulk that barrels through, steamrolls, takes over other places, and it's growing, and we're starting to see this hulk of an empire come to its fullness of being an empire. So for these last couple moments of this lesson, I want to talk about what does it mean and what does it look like now that Rome is at the fullness of its empire. It's meeting the height and the depth of what it was at its best intentions of being the full hulked out empire that it would become. Well, I want you to write down that at this point, the Roman Empire at full size extended all the way from Britain in the northwest to Mesopotamia in the east. It's up there for you to write down, and I'll say it again. The Roman Empire at full size extended all the way from Britain in the northwest to Mesopotamia in the east. So Rome, the Roman Empire is now at its full size that it's going to be during this time. It's at full size, full capacity, and it's extending all the way from Great Britain, literally the island where Great Britain is at in the northwest, to Mesopotamia in the east. We talked about Mesopotamia early in the year, gave you an idea of where it was around the Middle East, or in what we would call the modern day Middle East. So we got our map here, And I'm going to get my drawing tool just to give you a better idea. I'll use yellow. That should show up. So Rome started as this little itty-bitty dot in Italy, and now Rome includes all of this space. So I'm going to draw here. Going to keep drawing. So it's got all this space. It's got Britain, what we call Spain now, North Africa, Mesopotamia. It even extends a little deeper into Persia. Sorry, my line was a little off. It extends deeper into Persia. It goes eventually into parts of India, which would have been a little bit off this map, but it goes through Italy. It goes through Greece. It has parts of what we call modern-day Europe, but this is pretty large. It's a pretty expansive empire. It's got Israel, Egypt, a lot of these early empires we've talked about throughout the year. Rome grabs them all, takes them all. China's about the only one that Rome really doesn't take much from it. China still continues to go, but Egypt, Mesopotamia, Israel, Greece, they all become subject to Rome. Again, even parts of India become subject to Rome. Rome gets the gauntlet, has this massive, huge empire. And to give you a size idea, how much land Rome had by the time it was at its full height and its full extension was about as much land as the United States of America has. So when you put all the 50 states together and you think about how much land that is, that's about how big Rome was at its height in the day. That's pretty big for an ancient empire. In the modern world, that we just think of that and we're like, oh, that's no big deal, that's just how it is. But in the ancient world, that was quite the task. They had to conquer all that land, use their armies, their tools, their technology. That was quite a lot of land to own and have in your possession, especially in the ancient world. And of course, with a lot of land comes a lot of people. Things begin to get very packed. There's a lot of people. These cities, things are really growing up. And there's a lot of Roman citizens, a lot of Roman people. They're taking over lands. When they take over and conquer lands, they bring those people in. They had the people they started with. So things are growing and expanding very rapidly and getting very crowded. Rome is very full, very packed. So I want you to write down in your notes that by AD 212, every free person in the empire was considered a Roman citizen, and citizens were treated equally under the Roman law. I'll read that for you again, and it's up there for you to write down. By AD 212, every free person in the empire was considered a Roman citizen, and citizens were treated equally under the Roman law. So we now see that by this year, AD 212, every free person in the empire was considered a Roman citizen. So if you were free, you were a Roman citizen. As long as you weren't a slave, you got to be a Roman citizen. And citizens get fair treatment under the Roman law. We talked about a little bit how America has innocent until proven guilty. Everyone gets a fair trial, fair judge. We get a lot of those ideas from Rome because Rome eventually gets to the point that everyone that's a citizen treated equally under the Roman law. They all get the same fair rights, same fair chance. They're all granted those privileges. And this is by AD 212 that every free person, they're getting their citizenship. And with their citizenship, they're getting equality under the Roman law. I also want you to write down with people comes a lot of need for trade, a lot of need for movement, communication. So while we're talking about the growth of people and people getting citizenship, I want you to write in your notes that a network of paved roads was built throughout the empire which allowed people to communicate and move easily. I'll say it again, and it's up there for you to write down. A network of paved roads was built throughout the empire which allowed people to communicate and move easily. We're talking about these Roman roads. You hopefully did your worksheet and follow up on Roman roads to partially get ready for today. But these are the Roman roads we're talking about. It's this whole network and web of paved roads throughout the Roman Empire, and they allow people not only to communicate but to move easily, to move themselves, as well as move trade products, crops, and merchandise as well. And again, just a refresher, these are the Roman roads we were talking about yesterday. You did the little worksheet and the practice on them, reading some questions, answering them. You did that on Tuesday. And this is what it would have looked like. Pretty well paved, pretty well kept, and there's this whole network of them going throughout the empire. They kept the empire pretty well connected, again, for communication and movement purposes of people, soldiers, supplies, goods, crops, trade things. They kept this maintained network of roads that went throughout the entirety of the empire. And when we talk about the book of Acts, we talked about the book of Acts earlier this year in Bible. When we read about the book of Acts and the spread of the gospel in the early church, Roman roads were actually a really big player in the book of Acts and the spread of Christianity in the early church. Roman roads helped people be able to move about, communicate the message of the gospel effectively. There was trade routes, people coming in and out. So these roads played a big part in the biblical story, in the spread of the gospel, the early church. These Roman roads made it very easy to move throughout the Roman Empire, which is, again, the empire that was in charge and during the time that Jesus would have walked the earth, the time that Paul was alive and ministering. So this is a big part and a big player, even into what we read and study in the Bible. I want you to write in your notes that trade flourished and agriculture became a major part of Rome's economy. I'll read and say that again. It's up there for you to write down. Trade flourished and agriculture became a major part of Rome's economy. During this time in these Roman roads, these roads helped to push the movement of things like crops, trade goods, supplies. So trade goes up, it flourishes. That's what flourishes mean. It prospers, it's doing well, and agriculture becomes a major part of Rome's economy. If you remember, it all started as a small farming community. It started as a small farming community, but now it officially becomes farming, agriculture, becomes a major part of Rome's economy. That's a big money maker for them. Their crops, they have all kinds of crops now because they own all kinds of land. They have grain, they have grapes, they have olives, that whole Mediterranean region, everything it offers and produces, they can now use for their agriculture finances, their agriculture money intake. So it becomes a major part of their money making, their economy in the Roman Empire. Excuse me. So, as you remember, again, Rome started as a small farming community. So they kind of go back to their roots in their late stages of the empire. They started out as a small farming community. Now they're returning to their early roots of farming. And a lot of Roman people are still farmers, and farming becomes a major part of this massive Roman Empire's economy. It becomes a huge part, huge player. It makes them a lot of money. They return to their roots in a lot of ways. Now, you're probably maybe sitting there or standing there or watching there, and you're thinking to yourself, hey, Mr. McLeaf, question, what was life like for the people of Rome? The daily people, the common people. What about gladiators? What about women? What about daily life? Things like arts, theater, gladiators, science in Rome. And that is a great question, my young students. What, though, that is a question for another time. Next week, and in our final days of history, we're going to be diving into our final unit. It'll be a pretty brief unit, but it's going to be about the daily life of just Roman citizens, Roman people. Just like we did a side unit with Greek civilization earlier in the year, we spent some time diving deeper into the Greeks. We're going to do the same thing with Rome next week. So you can get excited for that. You'll have a final project, which I'll tell you about soon, but look forward to that. We'll be learning more about life for the regular old Roman citizens, not so much the history timeline type of thing we've been going through, but more looking at the people, what they did, how they lived. Just a few more things though in this video, so don't leave yet. I want to go over this guiding question with you. Got a couple things I want to tell you coming up, so make sure you stick around with me for the next few minutes. Back to our guiding question for the day. How did the Roman Empire become rich and prosperous? Well, there was a lot of trade, there was a lot to do with agriculture, different emperors coming to power, making different reforms and changes, helping the people, helping those in poverty, help them to become rich, to gain wealth, but also to become prosperous, to experience good things, to experience growth, to experience peace. So you could talk about the emperors in power, the changes they made, you could talk about agriculture, you could talk about trade. There's a lot of factors, but it all plays a part in the larger story of how the Roman Empire became rich and prosperous. Well, we've gone from Rome, Republic to Empire. Rome, Republic to Empire. We started with itty bitty tiny Rome in what we call modern day Italy, probably smaller even than the green speck you see on this map. It started small though, somewhere around that area, very small, very tiny, and it grows into this hulking beast of an empire. It becomes the incredible Hulk, the incredible Roman Empire. It grows and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and grows and expands, and pretty soon it takes over all of this Mediterranean region, from Spain to Italy to Israel, parts of North Africa, again, Great Britain, that lower area, India. It spreads out and it grows and takes over a lot of really the main and major empires we've talked about this year. It takes them, wipes them out, and claims it for the Roman Empire and the Roman land. But that's the Roman Empire. We've talked about it as a republic, talked about it starting as little baby Rome, talked about it growing now, and now we call it the Roman Empire, one of the most famous and most popular empires in all of history itself. Now let's talk about your assignment. I'm going to have you do an assignment on the rule of Augustus and the Roman peace. It's going to be your essentials worksheet. You're used to these every couple sections. We have an essentials worksheet that's up on LMS for you. Make sure you find that. Make sure you do the reading, then answer the questions and turn back in your work. Follow the instructions. You're going to want to do the reading. You can answer the questions, then turn in your work with that when you're done. That's on LMS. That's the essentials for these couple of questions. Last thing that I want to tell and share with you, today you have an essentials sheet due. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'm going to be explaining what I want you to do to prepare for the test, but Friday we will have a test on our unit Rome, Republic to Empire. This Friday, we're going to have a test on Rome, Republic to Empire. That's going to be on that unit. It's going to be a test, so make sure you've got your notes, make sure that you're caught up, make sure you've got notes for all the sections. The videos will be unlocked very soon for you, but you're going to want to make sure that you're ready, prepared, and you start to study for that test coming up this Friday. Speaking of study, I have your study guide up for you in today's folder. The date folder is Wednesday, so make sure you check there for your study guide. Use that to prepare and get ready for the test on Friday, because that's coming very soon, and I don't want it to sneak up on you or catch you off guard. Awesome, guys. Well, keep up the great work. Let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise, stay awesome. I'm praying for all of you. I'm proud of all of you, and I'll talk to you all very soon.